losing to a team that is playing so remarkably well.
Huge 28-3, 22 minutes in, the quickest.
Explain how you can make a profession out of this. How do they actually get paid?
Oh, Guardian, bye-bye! And it's on to Flamey. He's tapped it. Flamey's got a big. What in God's name is that from Stacks? Unbelievable!
Hey, this is Emma and welcome to Esports, Pro Players and the Law, Episode 3. In this episode, I'll be discussing the governance and regulation of esports, with a primary focus again on Counter-Strike. And in CS, there are no overarching structures or rules that govern player, team, or organisation conduct. Yes, there are terms of use for the video game itself, but that doesn't cover the more nuanced, complex space of professional competitions and the relationships involved. Unlike other esports, Counter-Strike tournaments and competitions are not exclusively organised by the developer, Valve. Instead, there are numerous leagues, organisations, associations and third parties that host the tournaments and set the team and player conduct. This means that at the moment, without a clear set of rules to go by, there are near constant allegations and reports of player and organisation misconduct.
Yesterday, a story was published by ESPN that said Luminosity, the current reigning major champions in CSGO, had their players signed to SK Gaming, the organisation which currently has a Danish team who finished second at Gfinity SIVO Season 9 Finals. That the players had signed with SK Gaming, but then after signing, they had backed out of the deal and decided they wanted to stay with Luminosity, and so on Friday, this week, SK threatened litigation against the players and Luminosity, and as a result, the story added in a detail that perhaps SK was themselves in danger of being removed from E-League, since E-League had some wording in there about torturous interference, which is the American terminology for poaching, which mainly only exists in most North American leagues.
A recent example is where an organisation, SK Gaming, attempted to poach the entire Luminosity gaming team, coach and manager whilst they were still under contract. SK's only reprimand came from one league, E-League, which banned both of the teams from attending the remainder of the 2016 competitions due to violating the roster rules. Unlike in other sports, neither team had any avenue to appeal this decision, as it's merely what the league commissioner says goes. This kind of example highlights the need for an overarching governance body. But for Counter-Strike and other esports, two features of the sport make this more difficult and complicated. Firstly, play is inherently international, as previously mentioned, with competitions held all over the world and teams coming from a diverse set of countries. Secondly, the developer Valve inherently owns the sport, that is, the intellectual property of the video game. By contrast, in other sports, there's no total ownership of the actual sport. There have been some attempts this year to create greater structure with the formation of regional organisational bodies. The development of WISA, the European-based World Esports Association, and PE, the North American-based Professional Esports Association, demonstrate some attempts to organise leagues and teams under an umbrella organisation. However, this has largely been met with resistance, distrust, and skepticism from the community. So why does the sport need regulation and governance? Well, industry commentators hope that it could solve the issues of scandals and misconduct and that of player burnout. There is hope that with overarching governance and regulation, players could be better protected from being overworked with a mandated off-season. There is also hope that if the sport was better structured like traditional sports, the players could apply their collective bargaining power to secure better working conditions.
It's all led the Australian esports community to informally unionise to help protect players' rights.
Because we're talking about money, we're talking about finances, we're talking about people who are often between the ages of 16 to 19, travelling overseas, winning lots of money and at the same time trying to juggle school.
But can in the world of esports a players' association actually exist? At the moment, probably not seems to be the answer, based on three issues. First, the players are only really professional for about 3 years, and this transient professional status means that they lack the practical ability to unionise. Second, as independent contractors, they have no legal rights to form a union. And finally, even if they overcame each of the previous obstacles, they could find themselves facing liability under antitrust laws, which are designed to stop anti-competitive behaviour, such as collective bargaining outside of employment relationships. Potentially, yes, this could happen, as it has in Korea, where the Korean Esports Association, a government-created group that manages esports within the country, successfully negotiated last year with the developer of another game, League of Legends, to introduce new policies for the season, including a 1-year minimum contract length for players and minimum player salaries. But in Counter-Strike, this could be quite difficult, as generally in countries other than Korea, there is a lack of recognition of esports as a sport and an industry. Rather, it's seen as a hobby, and therefore governments lack the political will to take action. Another problem with any regulation scheme, but especially one connected with the internet, is enforcement. And this is particularly a problem for CS, where the teams, leagues, organisations and players come from such a diverse number of countries. If overarching governance and the formation of a players' union are both unlikely in the near future, how then do players protect themselves and their rights? Basically, it comes down to education, support and advocacy. The education of players on their rights is the foremost method of increasing the bargaining power for players. In addition, creating an advocacy group that isn't a traditional union is more appropriate for the time and the money that esports and Counter-Strike currently have. With this in mind, stay tuned for my next video, which will look into the tangled mess that is match fixing, doping and cheating in esports, and how players can navigate the complex landscape to ensure compliance. Thanks for watching this episode of Esports, Pro Players and the Law.